on, everybody? It's your buddy, it's your pal Spaz, the YWC Reality Check, and for the first time in a long time, this is WWE Last Week, your weekly look back at the week that was in the WWE. Haven't done one of these in a while. Done a lot of wrestling previews, done a lot of wrestling reviews and off the cuffs, and a lot of good stuff with our buddy Jake. Shout out to Jake. Go find him on Countdown Ended on Twitter or X, and give him all of our best wishes. Hope to have him on again here real soon. And this is not, by any stretch of the imagination, going to be a regular episode of WWE Last Week, because first of all, we're going to be talking about more than WWE, and second of all, I'm not going through everything that happened this week, because there was a lot. A lot of it revolves around crossovers. I love the crossovers. I love everything that WWE is doing. First of all, because, let's be real, they should have been doing it all along. Second of all, it takes another bullet out of the gun of the Mud Show fans. The Mud Show fans pumped up AEW. Oh, AEW is so good, and AEW basically was good because WWE was bad. Now that WWE is awesome, takes that bullet out of their gun. Well, look at how progressive they are, and look how inclusionary they are. And oh, they work with people from here, from there, from everywhere. The Forbidden Door was the Forbidden Door because it was a knock on WWE, who had the keys to said Forbidden Door. So now that they're working with everybody and everywhere, it kind of knocks it out of the park, does it not? Let's just go through a couple. Obviously, the first sort of ringing of the bell was Jordynne Grace showing up to challenge Roxanne Perez at Battleground, which, the more I look back on it, I really hated the venue. I hated the UFC Apex because it made it so small. When you've got ridiculous, they are looking at going upwards of 18,000 people when I get to Heatwave in Toronto in a couple of weeks. The weekend after Canada Day, by the way. And they did pretty damn good at Stand and Deliver Oi 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 as well, as far as numbers go. I think it was like 16,000. In the middle, you've got this pay-per-view that had a couple of hundred in it. And you had this really cool historical thing where it was an NXT champion versus a TNA champion, and you had run-ins from somebody from TNA and Ash by Elegance, and you had run-ins from somebody from NXT like Tatum Paxley, and it was a big crossover thing, and the possibility of a cross-promotional champion was a huge thing, and obviously they kind of had to go with a BS ending because everybody was going to hold on to their titles, and it was going to go on to Against All Odds, but it was the first step in this direction that they have now with TNA. Now, the reciprocal to that happened at Against All Odds when Jordynne Grace had an open challenge, and it was answered by Tatum Paxley. Now, it was not, I will say, it was not the most exciting. It was the predictable, correct, logical answer in Tatum Paxley, but that's, in my opinion, that's mostly because if you were going to get somebody big, if Roxanne Perez was going to come and go tit for tat and say, I beat you, now I get a shot at your title, they would have advertised that. If it was somebody bigger, me, I was saying, take advantage of the fact that people think Becky Lynch isn't with WWE anymore and have her show up. Maybe Rebecca Quinn shows up in TNA and they do something there. They would have advertised the fuck out of that for an open challenge by Jordynne Grace, who, by the way, gave Tatum Paxley a phenomenal match, gave Tatum Paxley and opens the door for further people that are maybe in the mid-card of NXT to just get experience in a different ring in front of a different crowd. I think the match was fantastic. The ending was never in any doubt. Let me be clear about that, but I think it's fantastic. If the trade-off here, and this is only my initial thought here, if the trade-off here is that the big names of TNA get to showcase themselves on a bigger platform, and the mid-card of NXT get a little bit of experience in a different place that will give them a little bit of flexibility, dexterity in their characters and their abilities and all that sort of thing. That's not a bad trade-off, because let's be real, and I said this in a previous pod and I'll say it again here. This is a business deal between WWE and TNA, and everybody's saying like, oh, you know, TNA hasn't gained much yet. I mean, they have. I mean, Jordynne Grace has been in the Royal Rumble. Jordynne Grace has headlined an NXT pay-per-view, etc., as she deserves to. She's fantastic. If we could steal her away, I would, but that kind of defeats my point. But WWE has to get something out of it as well for it to be a business deal, or else it's just sort of a condescending, let us help you along because you can't do it on your own, which is not what WWE is doing. So if you can have your star on the bigger WWE stage, and I'm sorry, it is a bigger stage, then the reciprocal of that being taking somebody who's not necessarily a main eventer and maybe presenting them as a potential main eventer for one night on your show is a cool trade-off. And WWE is allowed to benefit from that as well. I think Tatum Paxley is the most I've ever seen out of a Tatum Paxley match because she's not given pay-per-view time on a regular basis, and she's been sort of resigned to playing the creepy character in mostly backstage segments and minimal matches, or been the third person in a story on NXT, which is fine. She's developmental. She's mid-card. She's been associated with main eventers, but like in like sidekick type roles like she was with Lyra Valkyria. This was her answering the challenge. This was her going for a belt. This was the spotlight totally being on her, not her being a piece of somebody else's story. And for Tatum Paxley, that is a step up. And I think that's really cool. And I think it's really, as the first person coming in the door, it's like, hey, by the way, NXT is coming here as well. Like, both Jordynne Grace and Tatum Paxley are being used as proxies to say, look, we had a TNA star. Look, we had an NXT star. This is representative of what's going to happen going forward. I think it was great. Were there much more exciting options? Sure. Did I fantasy book myself into oblivion, and was I a little bit let down when all the fantasy booking that I had done in my own head didn't come to pass? Of course. Are there still rumors that we're going to get Jordynne Grace versus Natty at Slammiversary, which I'm 100% down for? Yes, if we get it, cool. If we don't, I'm sure there'll be something else. They can't totally go the other way and ignore the contenders within their own company as well. So it can't just be this person gets a title shot at that company, that person gets a title shot at this company. Let's start a feud between a couple of people, or let's reach across the aisle and see the people that have previously existing like partnerships. My thing is get the Rascals back together, with Wesley being in NXT and the other ones being over in TNA. Yes, that means putting Zachary Wentz back on WWE television, but Zachary Wentz never should have been taken off WWE television. That was cancel culture. Let's not pretend that cancel culture isn't a thing. The next two are ones I'm only going to brush over briefly because they're not in my wheelhouse. I'm not going to pretend to know about stuff I don't know about. But AJ Styles is going to a Noah show to take on, I'm going to try and pronounce this correctly, Naomichi Marufuji. Don't know anything about Noah, don't know anything about Naomichi Marufuji, not going to pretend that I do, but it's still, like I said, it's representative. Our guys are doing stuff elsewhere, so let's wish them well. Kind of like CM Punk trying UFC, although I know that's not a direct comparison. But is it going to make me watch the Noah show? Probably not. Probably not, I'll be honest. The same thing with Io Sky going to Marigold to take on Utami Hayashishida. Again, if I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sorry. I will probably go on YouTube and seek out that match. Do you know, and I will tell you guys something, because although AEW can go fuck itself most of the time, I will give them credit for introducing me to people like Darby Allin, people like MJF, people like Ricky Starks, people like, you know, going on down the line. Do you know what introduced me to Kenny Omega? When somebody tapped me, you know, metaphorically speaking, tapped me on my wrestling shoulder and said, hey, you know that guy Jericho that you like? He's going over here to fight this guy Kenny Omega that you've heard so much about from the, you know, the indie experts and all that kind of thing. Maybe you should check it out. I did check it out. I would not have picked up a single bit of New Japan, whatever, content if it wasn't for that. So let's not pretend that that's not a thing. Way back in the day, back in the six-sided ring era, the only thing that got me to check out TNA was, hey, here's some guys you like. Their names are Jeff Hardy and Jeff Jarrett. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to have a ladder match in a six-sided ring. Do you want to check that out? Yes, I fucking do. So, am I going to watch the Marigold show? Probably not, but I will seek out that match with Io Sky. I will seek out what's AJ Styles doing, especially in the shadow of the loss to Cody Rhodes. What's he doing? Where's he going to take that frustration at this Noah show with Naomichi Marufuji? Maybe I'm going to see somebody else that I like. Yes, I'm going to go there. Check it off your Spaz Phoenix bucket list. It's fine. I went to a Destiny show for the first time. You guys have heard me talk about Destiny a lot. Do you know what got me to go to my first ever Destiny show? The Bruiserweight Pete Dunne was the Destiny champion, and he was defending it against John Morrison. It's a thing. It happens. So that's really cool. And I mean, you go backwards. You go Shinsuke Nakamura being part of the Great Muda's, retirement tour. And I had notes for a podcast that I was going to do a while ago, all these other times that WWE wrestlers and sometimes champions have gone to other shows and done things, and it's not by any means a thing that's never happened. I never got that podcast together because other things happened and current wrestling got more and more and more exciting, but I will do that at some point. But as it becomes even more common, that podcast will probably become irrelevant. And then just in general, I want to talk about, because there's so much going on with NXT and TNA, let's talk about the number one contender to Trick Williams. Now, the number one contender to Trick Williams ended up being Javon Evans, which is an entirely other cool story that we're going to talk about in a second. But how did we get there? We got there through a battle royal. The NXT number one contendership battle royal that was announced by Cody Rhodes, by the way, the same week that he hung out in the back with Lexis King and Ethan Page and Shawn Spears, and they were the four horsemen of being called up from AEW. And then, what did they do? They had Cody Rhodes come out. He announced that there was going to be this battle royal. He told Trick Williams, hey, there's going to be some familiar faces in that arena, but there's going to be some faces that you may not know, some faces from other locker rooms. And in the wake of the Noah announcement, people were saying there might be some people from Noah there as well. There wasn't. But who was there was Joe Hendry, who we're going to talk about in a second, and the former elite hunter, Frankie Kazarian. Now, Joe Hendry was an interesting one because Joe Hendry is a really entertaining guy that a lot of people have said for a long time. If there's going to be a crossover, you got to do Joe Hendry. He's got the call and response entrance. He's really fucking over because he's really fucking entertaining. And he did the whole, the typical battle royal, walk to the ring, make fun of everybody. It's really cathartic. The whole field gets together, baby faces and heels, and they eliminate you in like 10 seconds because that's the guy shooting off his mouth and then getting his comeuppance. That's a spot that has existed forever. And then everybody immediately, because they want to bury WWE, oh my god, I can't believe they buried another talent. They beat Jordynne Grace in a fantastic match. They only gave Jordynne Grace Tatum Paxley on their show. They also had a great match that helped Tatum Paxley to no end. Oh, they really just dumped out Joe Hendry. They also gave him promo time. They also gave him time to interact with the crowd before he even stepped in the ring, which they wouldn't have given him if they didn't see value in him. And also, they gave him backstage shit where he's standing face to face with Shawn Michaels saying, I'm Joe Hendry, I can show up on any show I want. The seed is definitely planted for him to come back to NXT, to maybe show up on SmackDown, to show up on Raw, to show up at a pay-per-view and maybe fuck with somebody. So it's the beginning. If you want to judge this entire deal, like say this deal goes 5 years and you want to deal with it as if the first 5 days is how the entire deal is going to go, then you're just trying to shit on WWE. And you don't mention at all, as a matter of fact, the fact that Frankie Kazarian, who's awesome, who I would love, and I'm not just trying to poach from TNA because he's a TNA original, but Frankie Kazarian could do no end of good, especially if he was in NXT. Think about the breadth of knowledge that guy has that he could pass on to the younger talents if he chooses to take on a role like that, let alone what he could contribute to either Raw or SmackDown. And he was one of the last 4 or 3 in that battle royal. So Joe Hendry got the big, huge pop, got the whole social media, WWE, NXT, all the YouTube and all that. His clips entering NXT, they said it themselves. WWE social media team put it out there. His clips on X, on YouTube, on I don't know, I guess TikTok or whatever, have the most views of any video they've put out since WrestleMania season. And that's not entirely thanks to WWE, that's thanks to Joe Hendry and how much you like him, but they wouldn't keep pushing his name out there if they just brought him out there to fuck him. They just wouldn't. And Kazarian was one of the first people announced. What they did, I thought was really cool because I followed the NXT account on Instagram, which of course I do, but they went live on Instagram about 5 seconds before about 3-4 minutes before the show actually went live, because you're not going to televise all 25 entrants coming out. Of course you're not. But the first one to come out was him. He got his music. He was walking to the ring as the first competitor. So in a really weird way, he got focus as well. He just didn't get mic time, which is fine. And you got to continue the feud that he's currently having with him in TNA. So there you go. There's a TNA feud taking place in an NXT ring. So it all works really, really well. Joe Hendry will be back at some point. I hope Kazarian's back at some point. I really thought it would have been cool if one of them had won to give them the Jordan Grace position at Heatwave. I'm biased because I'm going to be there. Would I have loved to do the Joe Hendry chant in the Scotiabank Arena? Yes, I absolutely would have. Would I have filmed the whole thing and made an ass of myself? Also, yes. It's not a burial because they didn't come in and beat 23 NXT stars. It's just not. And plus he was jumped at the bell by Ethan Page. There's mitigating factors that nobody wants to take into consideration. I popped for Joe Hendry. I popped for Kaz. Honestly, I've been a fan of Kaz since, like I say, once again, back in TNA's six-sided ring era. I'm like, oh, there's the guy that does the flux capacitor and whose ring gear mostly is made up to look like Metallica font. I think I'll pay attention to him for a while. So lots and lots and lots of integration, as well as AJ Styles in the pre-show for what's the show that just passed? The show that just passed. The one, Clash at the Castle. There we go. Thank you, Brain. At the pre-show for Clash at the Castle, he was hyping up the working relationship with TNA. Not only, now that works on two levels. Obviously, they're going to paint him in that light because he's a former TNA champion and one of the I guess you could say pillars of that era of TNA, but also it's the first person or the first star not in NXT to acknowledge the TNA crossover, and that means that the deal is not just an NXT deal. I think that's really cool. It's very much the same way as when they had Mickie James, when she was the Impact champion, come out into the Royal Rumble, and I understood the argument at the time. The argument was, yeah, she's the Impact champion or whatever, but they're just bringing her back because she's a former WWE star. And it's like, well, no. They're bringing her in as Impact's version of Mickie James. They're bringing her in as Hardcore Country. They're playing her TNA music. She's carrying her Impact championship to the ring. They're acknowledging Impact through commentary, through announcing, and all of that kind of thing. So that doesn't really work. And then that argument was blown out of the water when we get to this past year, when it was Jordan Grace, because she's never been in WWE, unless she's been an extra that I didn't know about. People are saying she was the girl in the Shawn Michaels Triple H chef skit from all those years ago, and that's why she gave Shawn Michaels a chef hat, which I think is just that's just people that seem to get along having a cool joke with each other. There's nothing wrong with that. You can have fun in wrestling. But so both Jordan Grace, who seems to be the figurehead of this new deal that they have with TNA, and AJ Styles, who's basically a TNA legend. I think he's a TNA Hall of Famer. I'm not sure. These two, both on separate occasions, have hinted at a Worlds Collide show. And I really want to see that, not just because I've been hinting at it forever, but because I think it could be genuinely good. I think it'll put to bed entirely the naysayers of this deal, because the naysayers of this deal, and I won't keep talking about the Mud Show fans, but I'll just say the anti-WWE fans, they're saying one thing, well, WWE's never worked with any other company, blah, 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 which isn't true. And then on the other side of the coin, they'll say, well, look at all these other companies that they worked with and they all got buried. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't say they've never worked with anybody and they say that they've buried everybody that they've worked with, because you're telling on yourself a little bit. But also, every example you can come up with, including those Rumble appearances, by the way, were under the old WWE. They were under the Vince WWE. They were under the WWE just being WWE. This is now TKO, run by Nick Khan, Triple H, and The Rock. This version of WWE that you are trying to supplant onto the last version of WWE is a brand new entity. This whole, generational guilt thing. I know there's a lot of situations in real life politics, in real life identity politics, where we like to pass on generational guilt. I'm sorry, as easy as it is for you guys to give me a cut and paste argument, the sins of the father-in-law do not get visited on the sins of the son-in-law. And no, he doesn't have to answer your stupid questions at a pay-per-view press conference that are not about the pay-per-view. You can go get fucked. Oh yes. But Styles and Grace have both hinted at a Worlds Collide show. I really think that would be awesome. I don't know whether you would do that through the lens of NXT or whether you would make it a full-on company versus company thing, because 3 shows of WWE does come across as being bigger than TNA, and you don't want to make an entire show where one side looks small. This is what I've said. TNA, as a company, unless you're like a diehard, and even I'm not a diehard, I got a lot of respect for those people. They've been hanging on for like 20 years. Even if you're a diehard, you got to admit not everybody talks about TNA as a brand to talk about. And within WWE fandom, which I'm definitely, and I'm fully in the center of that scope, not everybody talks about NXT. So they make sense. TNA and NXT come together, or NXTNA as has been hashtagged a whole lot, and Jordan Grace even put it on her wrestling gear. It is kind of the perfect match. And if they do a Worlds Collide, the branding of Worlds Collide was one that started in NXT. Anyway, the other thing you could do, because TNA kind of had their own version of Worlds Collide when they worked with New Japan, and it was Multiverse of Matches, and I think I even previewed a couple of those on this channel. If you want to just call this Multiverse of Matches and give the branding a little more to TNA to make it feel like even more of a TNA thing, that would be fine too. Both brands, I should say, TNA has Multiverse of Matches, NXT has Worlds Collide. Either one of those identities, those iconographies, can be used in a crossover show, and the crossover show would draw in the attention. And as I said this on a podcast a long time ago, the fan base that TNA has to hang on for like the 20 or whatever years it's been since TNA has been a thing, who have been through the TNA to the Impact to the Anthem Entertainment to GCW to GFW to what Impact became, and then finally to the rebranding back to TNA. There are people that have never left, and that brand has existed for 20-something years. The loyalty that the TNA brand brings will benefit NXT. Because NXT, even if you're somebody like me who likes NXT, it's still sort of the sidekick of WWE. So bring that kind of loyalty to the NXT thing will only make it bigger. And like I say, Heatwave in Toronto, yes, I've been checking WrestleTix a lot. I'm that guy. It's already approaching like 18,000 people for an NXT show. And you're talking to a guy, or you're listening to a guy, I should say, whether I'm in your ear holes or whether you're watching me on YouTube, you're listening to a guy that was at both TakeOver Torontos. Now, you're going to have to go a lot to beat those shows in my mind, because I think those shows were fantastic and they were entirely emblematic of the NXT that I like, the old school, black and gold, kick-ass, rock and roll, Triple H NXT. That was my jam, and we are still not quite there. But with the possibilities that we have now, when there's more crossover from the main roster, when there's now crossover from TNA, when we may get people that I'm not even familiar with from Noah and other places, maybe you integrate Bloodsport like they did with Shayna Baszler and Masha Slamovich, the potential of this show coming up in a couple weeks has me more excited. Will I say the show itself will be as good as TakeOver Toronto 1 and 2? No. The anticipation is on 10 from those shows. That's just speaking as one fan in Toronto that's going to be there. My anticipation of this show is on par with my anticipation of Money in the Bank. And when you consider all the things that are going on in WWE right now, that's a pretty high bar to set. The other cool thing that happened in TNA, and I'm not going to say much about this other than you guys know I'm a huge Jeff Hardy mark. Jeff Hardy joined his brother at Against All Odds, and they were taking on the System, and they sort of made a ramshackle team. It was the Hardy brothers, the Nemeth brothers, and Joe Hendry. Now, does this mean with the crossover that we're going to get the Hardy Boys in WWE? I don't know. I kind of doubt it. I think they finally found a home where they're more accepted. There's a lot of people saying, oh my god, why don't they just fucking retire? You know who's not saying that? The TNA fans. The TNA fans that got on board 110% with Broken Matt and Brother Nero. And funny as it is to say, for me as a WWE fan, I think the Hardy Boys are getting the appreciation that they deserve more in TNA than they would get if they came back in WWE right now, even though the pop would be huge. Do I want to see them at some point? Do I want to see them maybe do a cameo in the Royal Rumble? if they're doing a random gauntlet match on Raw to discover the next challengers for, say, R-Truth and The Miz, throw them in the gauntlet as a surprise and then have somebody beat them to get that shot legitimately. I have no problem with any of that. I think it's really cool seeing the Nemeth brothers as a tag team as they were at Against All Odds. They kind of got pooched, but that's neither here nor there. Jeff Hardy's been through a lot of shit. People can say what they want about Jeff Hardy. I'm going to pop when that music hits. I know it's like copy free, so anybody can use it. They used it in WWE. They used it in AEW. They are now using it in TNA. I think it's the most like generic wrestling music there is, but also because of that, it sort of carries something with it. Yes, I'm being incredibly sentimental. I'm a Jeff Hardy fan. I like to see Jeff Hardy on my television. I thought that was really cool. Speaking of returns, let's flip our gears a little bit into some WWE talk on this episode of WWE last week. Didn't have this on my bingo card. Seth Rollins returned on Raw. No announcement, no warning, just came out to open up Raw, talked about being away, talked about, welcome to Monday Night Rollins, Seth freaking Rollins, the whole thing. People made a big deal about how he wasn't introduced as freaking anymore, and freaking has been taken out of his Titantron. That's cool. He could still say it because the cadence that people talk to him when he does the call and response with the fans is still there. So let him do it. Just don't make it like a name tag, I think is the point. But he came out and he said, if I'm going to be here, I got to come back for one thing. I got to come back for that title that I lost. And he doesn't call out Damian Priest. He sort of looks up towards Money in the Bank. Now, it's kind of funny, with him and Priest being the only two guys to cash in Money in the Bank at WrestleMania, there's a link there. So for him to look up at Money in the Bank, it immediately put some respect on his name, because he didn't come out and say, hey, I've been gone a while. Hey, when I left, I just lost my championship. I deserve a title shot. No, he said, no, I'm going to crawl my way there, but there is a shortcut. And he looks up at the briefcase, and at which point he comes out and Damian Priest comes out and says, hey, genuinely welcome back and da-da-da-da, but respectfully, this isn't Monday Night Rollins anymore. This is where we all rise for El Champion, or El Campeon. I don't know. I don't know any other languages, so pronunciation and all. If you couldn't tell from me trying to pronounce the names of people from Japanese promotions, I'm pretty singularly English. So you'll have to bear with me when it comes to pronunciations on stuff like that. Sorry if I offend anybody. Basically, they go back and forth, and Priest basically calls his bluff, and Rollins says, you've always done stuff. It's really cool what you've done, and you've carried on from when I held the title and what I tried to make the title. And Priest gives him credit for like making the title what it was. And he says, but can you do it without your boys there? I know what it's like. I was part of the best group, and that was the Shield. And it's really kind of funny for people that say, oh, WWE never gives any credit to anybody that leaves and goes to AEW, but they do go out of their way to credit the Shield a lot. And basically, Priest challenges him. He challenges his next challenger and says, hey, what do you want? You want a title shot? Let's fucking do it. Let's do it at Money in the Bank. And I said, first of all, for me, big Rollins fan, big Priest fan, let's fucking go. And even at that point, he says, like, hey, are your boys going to jump me? He says, no, and all that kind of stuff. So we got Rollins back. We got Rollins immediately in a title match in a way that wasn't Rollins just came back and demanded a title shot. The argument always of somebody coming back and immediately getting a title shot is completely valid. Where you lose the, oh my god, what did he do to get a title shot? Where you lose that argument is when the champion says, fuck it, I'll prove myself against you. That's all you have to do. It's very, very simple. You don't have to do a 12-dimensional chess tournament bollocks thing. Oh, it's the Continental Classic. It's bullshit. It is what it is. Honestly, let's be real for a second. And then you do another tournament based on a dead guy. So Rollins is facing Priest at Money in the Bank. I'm going to be there. Have I mentioned that? I'm incredibly biased. I want to see the fuck out of that match. Do I think the title's going to change hands? Probably not. Do I think potentially the person that wins Money in the Bank cashes in on the night? Potentially, depending on who else is in there. We only know half the field right now. But Rollins coming out facing Priest, and I don't know what the story is for SummerSlam, unless the story is Finn Balor winning Money in the Bank, which is not technically a thing yet because he hasn't qualified yet. I mentioned it in my review. I just want to hit on it one more time. WWE doing more nice things. The title win of Isla Dawn and Alba Fire in Scotland was really cool, and I'm just going to mention it again because these are notes that were originally supposed to be for a collab, so I was going to be bringing that back up anyways. So I'll just say Isla Dawn and Alba Fire, and the way they carry the titles right now, the way that immediately they are teasing the split of Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair is a little on the nose, a little heavy, like Jade Cargill being all like up and excited and wanting to support her friend and saying, hey, you know, we lost our belts, we can get them back in no time, and Bianca Belair basically telling her to piss off because it's like, oh, I want to go do some single stuff now, I'm going to go win my way into the Money in the Bank, which didn't happen. How sad. How sad Bianca Belair isn't going to be immediately infused into another women's championship feud. Can you see the sadness dripping off me, or is that just sarcasm? Isla Dawn, Alba Fire are gonna go up against some other team. You got Candice and Indy there. You've got Zoe Stark, Shayna Baszler right there. You got Chelsea and Piper until that breaks down. There's Katana Chance, Kaden Carter in there as well. You don't need Bianca Belair in there soaking up another belt. You just don't. Really ridiculously happy for Isla Dawn, Alba Fire, and as I mentioned before, especially when you consider the couple of weeks that Alba Fire had just had in her own personal life, which is really none of our business. You like to see her get something nice. Now, bigger than titles. Way, way, way bigger than titles or Money in the Bank briefcases or tournaments or anything like that is the awesome story between CM Punk and Drew McINTYre. And for the record, yes, you are allowed to say nice things about Mr. CM Punk, especially when it's this awesome. Punk screwed Drew at Clash at the Castle. Everybody lost their mind. Oh, it's not very logical. It's not very logical. How did he become a ref? He didn't become a ref. He threw on a referee's shirt to distract Drew McINTYre. Well, it was a 3 count. If it was a regular ref, there would have been a 3 count. Yes, but the actual ref of the match was still down. Either way, when he rolled into that pin, he wasn't getting that pin. It is what it is. The fact that he got so in Drew McINTYRE's head that he also lost the match and sent him home fuming and all that kind of thing. And I love the narrative that has come out of this because, you know, the Mud Show fans are telling on themselves once again, oh, WWE just fucked with the fans again. Listen to that reaction in Scotland. Well, people in Scotland are upset that their person from Scotland lost. Listen to the chants. Listen to the volume of the chants that CM Punk got on SmackDown. CM Punk said in the press conference of Clash at the Castle, I've got permission to not be there on Monday Night Raw, which was not necessary because he's not there every week anyway. But he says, I've got permission not to be there on Monday Night Raw, and I've also gotten myself permission to come to SmackDown, considering it's in my hometown of Chicago. So now, all you WWE draft truthers out there that want to say, oh, well, you just hopping from show to show. Nope, he got permission from his general manager, and he asked permission from the general manager of the show that was going to be in his hometown. Can I be a guest for the evening? Your argument doesn't hold water. Just admit that WWE is doing well. It's not that hard. It won't kill you. I will admit, when I was going to SmackDowns where the entire other half of the arena was tarped off. Now, was that sad? Yes. Was it kind of cool that I got bumped from the 300s to the 100s? Also, yes. But I looked at that and I said, why isn't my company doing so well? Funny how other people cannot do the same. Anyway, CM Punk came out to do all kinds of ragging on Drew McINTYre. He talked about, you know, what you do when you get knocked down. Do you quit? No, we don't do that. Do you dust yourself off and turn the other cheek? Nah, we're from Chicago. We don't do that. No, you get up and fight. And I promised that I would, back 13 years ago, I promised that I would come into my hometown and leave with the championship. I did that. Drew didn't. It's a story about pressure. I can't imagine the pressure of going to your hometown and not getting the job done. It was fucking great. Now, we diverted from this beautifully. We diverted from the CM Punk Drew McINTYRE's story beautifully, in the sense that, of all people, Paul Heyman came out. Paul Heyman, who's held hostage by this current version of the Bloodline, and he said, basically, you know, we're in Chicago, and all the radio talk show hosts are calling this CM Punk City, but Solo wants every city he's in to be his city. I need you to, I'm going to do you a favor, and I need you to do me a favor. The favor that I'm going to do you is to tell you to leave right now. And then the Bloodline came out, and Punk turned to Paul and he said something along the lines of, well, what was that favor that you need me to do for you? And in a moment that I wasn't expecting, I'll be perfectly honest with you, because Paul Heyman is a fantastic actor that nobody gives enough credit to, he says, you're going to leave, you're going to leave, you're going to leave. Okay, the favor I need from you is I need you to take me with you. He said, and, you know, Solo comes out, and Solo doesn't cut as good a promo as Roman Reigns. Well, no shit, Sherlock. But what they're doing here is pretty damn cool. He says you can either get out of here or you can acknowledge your tribal chief and whatever. And he says, what did he say? He says, I will acknowledge that all I see is a couple of counterfeit Usos, which probably still hold more value than counterfeit Bucks, and a discount tribal chief. They come, they separate the ring, they surround the ring, I should say. They're going to beat the hell out of CM Punk. I'm watching this. I've got that nagging, like, real life part of my wrestling brain that says, okay, nowhere in that speech did he say he's been cleared by doctors yet, so he's not actually going to be involved in anything physical. What are they going to do here? Not only is he saved by Cody Rhodes, which is just a brilliant visual, but it's Cody Rhodes with the bats. And with the recent retiring of Sting and Cody Rhodes' direct ties to AEW, not being sarcastic for a second here, it was really cool to see the two of them swinging bats rather than just like the WWE cliches of like a steel chair or even a kendo stick. The bats were a very specific choice, and I like that. Now, later on in the night, we get some other stuff. Later on in the night, we got Cody Rhodes versus Solo Sikoa, which I was hoping that we were going to see at Money in the Bank, because that's a match that I want to see, unlike other people who are saying, oh my god, how dare they put Solo Sikoa in the main event. Well, how do you elevate people? If you say this person can't be in the main event, this person can't be in the main event, that person can't be in the main event, and then you turn around and accuse the company of not making new main eventers. To make new main eventers, you got to take chances on people that may not look like main eventers yet. But he challenges him to a match tonight, to which I thought, oh, damn, that means we're probably not getting it at Money in the Bank. But then the rumors come out further that we're saving that match for SummerSlam. So that's, like, I'm not getting it immediately because we're getting it later on tonight on SmackDown, and we're not getting it immediately because it's going to happen at SummerSlam instead. Now, what I will say, I would love to see Cody Rhodes versus Solo Sikoa at Money in the Bank. Now, if I flip the coin, do I think Cody Rhodes versus Solo Sikoa is a SummerSlam main event? Probably not, especially right now where you want WWE to make SummerSlam feel as big as possible to get ready for, in 2 years, the possibility, or sorry, not the possibility, the announcement that they're going to be going to a 2-night event, much like WrestleMania. They're going to be putting even more of an emphasis on how big SummerSlam is, which is why I thought they were going to do Solo and Cody at Money in the Bank, which I would get to see, because did I mention I'm going? And then you would get something like a Randy Orton versus Cody at SummerSlam. Sorry, brain fart there. But we're not doing that. Apparently we're saving it for SummerSlam. And they basically chase off the Bloodline with the bats, and you think, okay, Punk's going to get the message one way. If he didn't get the message from Paul Heyman, maybe he's going to get the message from Cody Rhodes, like, hey, maybe you should fuck off. But later on in the evening, there's an interview going on between DIY and A-Town Down Under, or one of them. I think it was just Grayson Waller. The idea being that they were being interviewed in front of a roll-up door, and you heard a big couple of smacks and everything cut again. So we had big banging on the door, big banging on the door, interrupting the interview between the tag team champions. They fuck off. The one challenger fucks off. The interviewer fucks off. The door lifts up, and we see Drew McINTYRE, looking like the size of a house, standing over a beaten CM Punk. Not only over a beaten CM Punk, a beaten and bloody CM Punk. And he just picks him up, he drags him, everybody's trying to stop him. He walks by everybody. They do one of the cool tracking shots, but like everybody's there like, what the hell is this guy doing? He walks out onto the rampway, and he doesn't do anything with any kind of pageantry or circumstance. He just drops CM Punk on the stageway, mocks a little bit of the pose, and then he takes a bracelet off of CM Punk's arm, which I found out later on is a bracelet with his wife and his dog's names written around them, so it's sort of like an unsaid kind of like threat to your family type thing. I thought that was brilliant. I think there's one problem. I hate to give AEW credit, I really do. There's one problem with the CM Punk Drew McINTYre story, and it's the problem that existed in the old Terminator movies. Any Terminator movie that existed before Judgment Day that talked about Judgment Day made it sound like this absolutely apocalyptic, unthinkable thing, so that anything that they produced to say, hey, this is what Judgment Day actually looked like, would not measure up to what you've built up in our heads previously with the talking and the characters building it up and all that kind of thing. I don't think WWE can produce a violent enough match to back up what they've done with CM Punk and Drew McINTYre. I want to believe that they can. I do think all the ridiculous and unnecessary excesses of a company like AEW, but in a one-off match, is what this match needs. The absolutely bitter person that we know CM Punk to be, and the absolutely raging powerhouse, like, pile of anger that we see Drew McINTYre to be, it has to be violent, and it has to be bloody, and it can't be the bell rings and you go for a lockup. And that's in AEW's wheelhouse, and I hate to say that, but we need Punk Drew to mirror Punk MJF. And is that me giving a whole lot of credit to MJF because I think he goddamn deserves it? Yes, MJF. Wrestlers in AEW have a lot of my credit. They really, really do. The company can go fuck off, but the wrestlers in that company are fantastic and deserve all the credit in the world for succeeding in whatever they do within that really, really shitty power structure. The problem that I have with Punk Drew is I don't think WWE can give us a violent enough match to justify everything that they've done so far and justify the potential that both of these guys have to have a match like that. It's a concern. It's a backwards compliment in the sense of you've given us such a good story, I can't possibly think of what the payoff will look like. But that was to detour us from the initial starting, which was Cody Rhodes coming out to save Punk and getting the match with Solo tonight. The match lasted about 3 minutes, if I'm honest, not even that. There was a 3-on-1 beatdown with him and Tonga Loa, Tama Tonga, Solo Sikoa beating the shit out of Cody, and Kevin Owens and Randy Orton, who'd both been beaten down by the Bloodline previously in the night. They come down, they try to make the save. Kevin Owens is hobbling on one foot to an almost comedic degree, and it shows, and they get the crap kicked out of them. They get tossed out of the ring. But then the babyfaces make their comeback, and they toss Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa out of the ring. They have Solo in the corner, who's actually begging off for the first time ever, but the begging off turns into a big, creasy smile to an attack from behind from another guy who I'm not that familiar with, but who I'm really excited about because of what everybody else has told me, and really, really looks good in the first time that I've ever laid eyes on him is Jacob Fatu, who obliterates everybody, including your current reigning WWE champion in Cody Rhodes. Obliterates everybody. Solo goes to give him a hug, but he doesn't even hug him back. His arms are just at his side, like he wants to go. He wants to keep like hurting people. And even as you see the Bloodline pose at the end of the night with the fingers up in the air, even Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, who were brought in as these assassins, were not looking like they were 100%. Like, they were scared of this guy that's now in their midst, and Paul Heyman just looks like he wants the earth to open up and swallow him whole. Paul Heyman, from the original Bloodline till now, is like the unsung hero of the entire Bloodline saga. The Bloodline saga does not work without Paul Heyman, and don't think that's a stretch. I really, really don't. And the last thing we got to talk about is the debut of the WYATT 6. What was it going to be? What was Bo Dallas going to look like? Who else was going to be in the group? We had rumors, but we didn't know 100%. Was it going to be just a rehash of Bray Wyatt? Was it going to be a rehash of The Fiend? Was it going to be just Uncle Howdy coming out and saying stuff? Were they going to attack some people? Was there going to be some spooky, supernatural stuff? Nobody really knew, other than rumors that it was going to be this person or that person. Rumors that it might go this way, it might go that way. Rumors that, excessive costuming has been made and all that kind of thing. Jey Uso won his qualifier in the main event of Monday Night Raw, which was kind of cool, because what they've done with his entrance recently is lowering the lights and letting everybody put their lights up in the air. And he even said, if I can do anything to replicate the Fireflies for somebody like a Bray Wyatt, I'll gladly sort of take that on, even though it's not the same thing. He was celebrating in the crowd, and the crowd were doing the lights and all that kind of thing, and then you hear that as all the lights turn out. And the music didn't actually start, but the repeated one-note piano thing started happening, and then you went to the stageway, and it was the same door that the last iteration of Bray Wyatt sort of walked through with the lantern and all that kind of thing. And the door flew open. The cool thing about this is Jey Uso doing his exit in the crowd is a cool misdirect and a reason to not look up the rampway while they're setting up the door and doing all the logistical stuff for this. But we saw just one person, and obviously it's Nikki Cross, but somebody basically walking out like it's the Grudge, or walking out like the way she was moving was sort of a combination of the way the Boogeyman used to move, like with the jerky motions and all that. A combination of that, and if you've seen the movie Megan with the AI little girl who kind of like dances, but it's really creepy, and it's kind of automatic looking because she's a robot. It was kind of a mix of Megan and the Boogeyman. The way she came out, crawling out, looking like something from The Grudge, with a really creepy looking, like unsettling looking mask. And she sort of contorts herself to point backwards through the door. And you think, okay, she's come out first to point at the door so the rest of them can come out and we're going to see what they look like. But instead, it's just a trail, and they go past the doorway really quickly into the technical area, and you see a couple people laid out. It's like, okay, they've jumped a couple of people, and then you see Eric Rowan in a ridiculously creepy, almost Donnie Darko rabbit costume with the hammer. Now let me tell you why that works on a couple levels. A, it's Eric Rowan, who was in the original Wyatt family. Eric Rowan, who became one of the Bludgeon Brothers, who had the sledgehammer when they came out, along with the late great Brody Lee, when he was Luke Harper. But also the fact that Ramblin' Rabbit in the Firefly Funhouse was also squashed by the hammer a whole lot. So that all comes together, and the hammer even says help on it in bloody letters. They go into the main portion of Gorilla, and Mercy the Buzzard is apparently Joe Gacy. I mean, I'm going to get this mixed up because the costuming was so great that you couldn't tell who's who, and that only worked in its favor. And he was sort of perched on a table that looked like it had a TV on it. The TV that was flashing the new WYATT 6 logo. I do love the WYATT 6 logo in the case that it's not just WYATT 6, it's WYATT SICKS, but the S is a 6. So it's the WYATT 6/6, really. Which, take it one step farther, it would be WYATT 666, but it's also, they are the Sick 6, which also makes sense. I do love the fact that the idea of there being only 5 members, the idea possibly being that Bray Wyatt himself is the 6th member and he's always with us and that kind of thing. As a memorial, that idea is pretty cool. The other option to that is, the modern impersonation of Sister Abigail, which was Alexa Bliss, who's not quite ready to come back yet from what we've all heard. So if she comes back to be the 6th member, she was acting closest to him before he left, so her being the final member would make sense. Anyways, the logo I think looks really sick, no pun intended. He's there perched over everybody, and everybody's bloodied. There's like blood spatter on the back walls and all kinds of shit that you would not expect typically from WWE. Everybody's laid out, and you can start seeing that there's people there that are not just extras. Like there's a guy, and it's all done over with fog, so maybe they're supposed to look like extras, but like Carmelo Hayes is in there, and I think Gunther was in there, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody said that they saw Braun Strowman, which would be a hell of a take, because is he the one guy from the family that rejected this new version of the family? Could that be a story? Absolutely. But the one that everybody's talking about is Chad Gable, who's leaned up against a case with what looks like a bullet wound on his temple. It's clearly not. It's very clearly not going to be a bullet wound. They're not going to shoot somebody. It's not going to be like a Brian Pillman situation. It's not going to be like Steve Austin chasing McMahon with the gun and then it says bang 316 or anything like that. It's not going to be that. But he was the one that they focused in on. So you gotta believe he's the first one that they're going after. But then you saw whoever it was, either Dexter Lumis or Joe Gacy, whichever the other one was, in a pig mask. So, you know, he's Huskus the pig, but the pig mask almost looks like a gas mask. And we go through, and then finally at the end of the tunnel, you see this new, more modern version of Uncle Howdy. Now, Uncle Howdy was kind of creepy looking anyway before when he was out there with Bray Wyatt, but there was a cartoonish element to it as well. They've taken that away completely, and he sort of wanders the hall, sort of collecting his members as they go through, overlooking the damage as he goes through. Nobody says anything until they all go out, and Nikki Cross has been watching the whole time from the outside. She's the only one that the fans in the arena could see. Reaches down beside her to pick up the lantern, so the lantern iconography is still very much there. The "we're here," and then he blows out the lantern and it all goes away. Here's the thing. There is no was this good, was this not good. I thought it was fantastic. I'm a horror movie fan. Of course I'm gonna like this. But it doesn't matter. Like, I know I've said this before, and I know I sound like I'm getting on a soapbox with it, but like, even if this isn't your thing, cool, fast forward to a different part of the show. Or at least acknowledge what these particular people that have chosen to be part of this are trying to do. I know it's hard to wrap your head around this. There is something about horror movies and being scared that brings people together. So a horror tribute to somebody is fantastic. Is really, really cool, because being scared is a feeling that everybody can have in common. It's like I used to say, for actors, right? Anybody can do anything in a movie, but the hardest thing to do in a movie is be funny. Because depending on what story you're telling, most people can agree on what's sad, most people can agree on what's good, bad, what's happy, what's joyful, what's fun. Everybody has a different version of what's funny. So if you can be a comedian, you can pretty much be anything else. That's been a take I've had about movies for a long time now. Not everybody agrees with me, and that's absolutely fine. We can't all be right. But this is something else. Like, funny laughter is something people can all gather around together. Or look at the events of real life. What do we gather around? Things that bring us joy and things that we're afraid of. Whether you want to get into political talk, whether you want to get into social issues, whether you want to get into like natural disasters, what brings us together? What brings us together is fear. Fear relates to horror. A horror-related character like Bray Wyatt, who did so much psychological cool work, means that a tribute to him has to be that scary, has to be that psychologically mind-bending. And in that sense, to me, and I know specifically Corey Graves said, for as horrible as it was and for as rough as the subject matter is and how aggressive it looked and all that, it genuinely was a heartwarming thing to see, because of anything you could say about this, and like I say, I'm not judging this to be good or bad. The one thing that they couldn't do with this was half-ass it. And they definitely didn't half-ass it. And despite the fact that they were coming out there trying to be all creepy and solemn and you know, ghoulishly looking at all that. The minute they got out there, and it was only for a second, you can see it if you watch the replay, because I've watched it a lot. There's the moment where Bo Dallas, Uncle Howdy, whatever he's going to be called, he picks up the lantern from Nikki Cross when he brings them all together into sort of like that let's take a group shot kind of pose. And when you see the light on his face and when you see him looking around at all the fireflies in the building, the smile on his face, like, that's all you need. Because, again, not getting on a soapbox, this is Bo Dallas doing something for his brother. This is going to be a lot of fun for us, but on a much more human, serious level, this is for him and his brother. This isn't for us. People are going to disagree with me saying that, but I really don't care. I really don't care. It's really cool. I'm kind of biased because I was a huge Bray Wyatt fan. All the creepy people that are involved in this are people that I've enjoyed at one time or another, and this kind of thing is right up my street. But if it's not, just turn off the show 5 minutes early. That's all I can tell you. If you're gonna dig your claws into this, you're probably an asshole. That's all I got. I thought it was absolutely amazing. Now, that being said, as a whole, how much shit happened this week? We got the WYATT 6. We got Drew McINTYRE quitting and then killing CM Punk. We got the debut of Jacob Fatu. We got the return of Seth Rollins. We've got a whole lot of crossovers going on with a lot of companies, but specifically with TNA. In TNA, we got Jeff Hardy back, which is really awesome. Paxley went over to TNA. That was a lot of fun. AJ and Io are going out to Noah and Marigold, respectively. We had more NXT stars in the Battle Royal. We had the Joe Hendry debut on NXT, which promises more and more and more. And like I say, it was at the beginning of the week. I kind of wish they were a SmackDown act, because I would think that the WYATT 6 would be a cool way to cap off the week instead of just start it. Again, that's just me. There's a lot. One of the things I said on social media recently, and I do repeat a lot of my takes on social media, because when I have them, I put them out there, and then I come and talk to you guys, and it's like, what did I say this week that I thought made sense? If you go to somebody and you say, what is your favorite thing going on in WWE right now? There's a big long list of things that are going on in WWE right now that are awesome, right? And the fact that that list is that long, that the list of things that could be your favorite thing is that long, that list is now my favorite thing. My favorite thing is that there are so many things going on in WWE right now that could be your favorite thing. And that's a huge win. And I'll be nice when other people are struggling and not doing so well and having half full arenas and whatever. When somebody comes to me and says, what's going on in WWE? And I say, everything. Everything's going on in WWE. And if WWE is the fist, the fingers are going out into a lot of different places. Yes, I know how that sounds. NXT, Noah, Marigold, Bloodsport, All Japan. Apparently they're reaching out to AAA again. Like I say, I don't know what a big deal that is. I don't have a very firm grasp on my knowledge of AAA. Somebody else get down in the box and tell me, is that something I should be excited about? There's a lot going on. And on a personal note, on a selfish note, yes, for me, for anybody in the Toronto area, we got Money in the Bank weekend coming up. Not only do we have SmackDown, but we have NXT Heatwave, which technically only has one match right now, Trick Williams versus Javon Evans. Now, the rumor about Trick Williams and Javon Evans off the back of last week is that it's going to be turned into a four-way, adding in All Ego, Ethan Page, and Shawn Spears. Much as I would love to see that four-way, I would much rather see Shawn Spears and Ethan Page become a tag team and go after those tag team titles, because I think Shawn Spears and Ethan Page versus Axiom and Nathan Frazier would be a hell of a match, and I think Ethan Page and Shawn Spears would be a hell of a set of tag team champions. And do it in Canada. Do it in Canada. They're both heels. They'll get cheered on the night. It's absolutely fine. It's Drew McINTYRE in Scotland. Just do it. Just let them be assholes, but let them come out and wave the Canadian flag like while they're being assholes. Let them come out and laugh at Axiom and Nathan Frazier at how they're being assholes and still getting cheered because they're in their home country. That's a hell of a story. Do I want to see the Fatal 4-Way match? Not particularly. I would rather see Shawn Spears and Ethan Page pick up those tag team titles. Personally, Money in the Bank, we've already got Seth Rollins versus Damian Priest, which I'm all the way on board for, not gonna lie. And so far, for the Money in the Bank briefcase matches, we've got Chelsea Green and Io Sky for the women, and we've got Carmelo Hayes, Andrade, and Jey Uso for the men's. So, yes, for me, selfishly, specifically, down to my core, what am I thinking about right now? I'm thinking about, I got Canada Day weekend coming up this weekend, and the following weekend is the real holiday, because I'm going to be spending 3 back-to-back-to-back nights in Toronto at Scotiabank Arena watching WWE be awesome. Have I rambled on for quite enough yet? I hope so, because I'm starting to lose my voice. I've been Spaz, your YWC Reality Check. Subscribe up there, talk down there, start a conversation, keep all these conversations going. Don't be a stranger. I will talk to each and every last one of you later, but for right now, I am tagging out.